So our media relations leader, he called me and he goes, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "No, but I can be." And he said, "I just got off with the Associated Press, and there there is an Iranian cyber terrorist group that is targeting you." And I was like, "I'm now going to sit down. Thanks."
Yeah. Wow. Welcome to the Security Cocktail Hour. I'm Joe Patti.
I'm Adam Roth.
Amanda King.
Yes, we have Amanda King, who is reminding us what day we're recording on. It is Pie Day. There we go.
Yeah, go enjoy some banana cream pie today.
Oh, that's right. See, now I got to go out and get some. But we're actually not here to talk about mathematics. At least I don't think so. We're probably not going to get into anything that heavy. We're talking about security and cyber. And this is a morning edition we call a hangover edition. So we have our official mugs, our coffee mugs, which is always fun.
Oh, look at that one.
Amanda's got the special edition. Awesome.
That is special edition.
Thanks.
Only the elite get this one.
We got a lot to talk about. We're going to get a little more down to earth to start. Everyone has heard of APTs and being targeted, and especially these days with what's going on in the world, we're hearing more and more about cyber attacks.
Yeah.
Amanda, you've got a story to tell us about it that's really interesting.
I think we should jump in first. For those who don't know, an APT is an advanced persistent threat, and basically that's the way they code nation states, the states that attack people. And some different companies, they have numbers for them. Some of them have names. I mean, if I was an APT, I would be like pretentious panda, so something like that.
Yeah.
I love the names, though. I mean, I will say, like, if they get credit for anything, some of them have very interesting names. So the particular one that targeted me was the Charming Kittens. And I will tell you, there is nothing charming about these kittens, in my view.
They're a nasty one, too, from what I understand.
They are.
Wow.
And it was, I thought it was timely because of everything that's going on around the world right now, particularly with Iran. And so, these kinds of threats are really increasing. And so I thought it would be good to just kind of share my story. And I really wanted to focus on why it's important that we think about the mediums that we're using to send information and our personal mediums, your Gmails, your Yahoos, does anyone still use like AOL or,
They
whatever?
I thought they went out of business or something. Anyway.
No, they still have it.
There's a few emails out there for them still. I mean, you want to be really careful with what you send. So let's go back in time. We're going to go back to 2018. And I was working at a very large company, and I had a cool title. It was actually one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life. It was so much fun. I was Senior Director of Breakthrough Technology and Innovation. And so it was
that's fantastic.
It was so much fun. And so we were on like the leading edge and even bleeding edge of a lot of really cool things. Well, there are other people in the world who find innovation by large American companies interesting. And my title, I think, happened to be interesting. I personally am very uninteresting, which I'm sure they found out when they dug through my life. But there was a list of 77 specific people who were targeted, and I happened to make that list. To this day, I just have no idea how I made this list of like 77 people.
Amanda, was this in your company or was it just
No,
everywhere?
This was globally. There were.
Oh, really? Is that right?
Yeah, these were like major political players. These were like people with like very strong nuclear backgrounds. I mean, people who like legitimately were very interesting. And then me. Here I was.
Oh, I think you are. Is that on your resume? Because that'd be at the top of my resume. The Charming Kitten came after me. I was that important.
Maybe I'll revamp my resume and add that to the top. Charming Kittens love me.
I'm going to do that, Joe. I'm going to put that on my resume. APT -4, persistent panda, or I don't know, something like that.
There you go. I love it. Yeah. But you have to have a real snuggly panda like logo with it. Anyway, so these guys, it was really fascinating, the whole process, because they were targeting these folks who were, they believed may have something to do with some technology that they were interested in. And I had just gone through a few months earlier media training with my company. And so I was doing these, sort of like industry periodical things and interviews. And so the Associated Press called me, and I was in DC at the time. And I thought, my first thought, this is so stupid, but I was like, ooh, I am like hot stuff. Like, I got the Associated Press calling me now. They must have heard that I'm really good at interviews. Now, mind you, I've been doing like aviation journal magazines, which are awesome for aviation geeks, but the rest of the world's not as
Yeah.
like, hyped up about that. So, but as a, good media trained employee, I was like, oh, you're going to have to talk to our media relations folks. And so I blew this guy off. He's like, no, I think you really want to talk to me. And I'm like, no, you have to go through our channels. So I punt him off. He calls me again. He calls me like 3 times. And all 3 times I'm a really good employee. And I'm like, you got to talk to our media relations. So our media relations leader, he called me and he goes, are you sitting down? And I was like, no, but I can be. And he said, I just got off with the Associated Press and there is an Iranian cyber terrorist group that is targeting you. And I was like, I'm now going to sit down. Thanks.
Yeah.
You
Like,
might have
what the
almost
hell
fell
does
down.
this mean? What does
Yeah.
this mean? And so it was just really, it was a really eye-opening situation for me. And they did end up getting into my personal stuff. They did not get into any of my work stuff, which was great. Because from a company perspective, like you always want to protect your company. And the companies I've worked for have always had really strong infosec, really strong, measures to make sure that people can't get in. So that part was safe. That was great. My personal life stuff apparently was all out there for them. And that was, again, for them, probably very uninteresting. I'm sure they dug through it and they were like, yeah, okay, next. But for me, it felt so exposing. And I started thinking about, gosh, what are the things that I'm sending through my email? What are the things that they could have possibly seen? Anything with bank information, with tax information, with my kids' information, whatever that is. And then I got a phone call from like a 3-letter agency, and they're like, "Hey, we know what happened." I'm like, "Oh my gosh!"
I would have been
And,
like, do something. What are we paying you for?
I know. I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" And they're like, "We need to get into your information. Are you willing to give us access?" So now, not only do these like less than charming kittens have my information and all of my, uninteresting life exposed to them, but now, of course, I was more than willing at the time. I was super terrified. I'm like, you can look at anything you want. I have nothing to hide. So I gave them access, but now I gave access to my whole life to, this a group of fine individuals who were there to help me. But it was a lot to take in, and it just really made me think about the world of anything that's traveling via any medium of, the cyber world, and who can access it. And then when someone accesses it, who else is going to need it, right? And what are you putting out there? And so it just was a good reminder for me that I need to get not only my sort of work information life secure and safe, but my personal life too.
Joe does the Snowden thing. I mean, I do it similar to it. Joe uses a certain domain for his email.
I assume with my private stuff, except for I do use some Snowden type things that, people are in it, particularly the 3-letter agencies. I think it's hilarious because if they came to me and asked for access, I'd say like, cut the crap, guys. I know you have everything.
You have access.
But knowing that, and then knowing that someone's looking at you specifically is very different. So, I mean, Amanda, how did you deal with that? Like, did you change anything? Did they help you at all? I mean, like, where did that go?
They were very, I will say they were very helpful. And it was also just personally very interesting because my husband was deployed at the time. He was he was in
Thank you
Iraq
for his service.
being a Marine. Yeah,
yours.
I call him Captain America. He's amazing. He was a Marine for 30 years. Master guns. He wasn't actually a captain. Might not prefer to be called an officer. He worked for a living. So he was deployed. I found out about this when I was in DC and my kids were in Arizona, and so there was this sort of mom instinct that kicked in immediately, where it's like, how far could these guys reach, and are my kids safe? And so yeah, the first thing I did was I had these sort of ancillary like emails that I hadn't really used in a long time. I shut all that stuff down, cut the fat, right? Got rid of the things that I don't really need. And we went and we had a friend of ours who, knows a lot about like sort of in-house networking and stuff come in and just make sure that we had all the security measures within our network in our house that we could possibly do. And then I made sure that I had, we have kids who grow up on devices. And so I had to make sure that we had, the anything, right? The McAfees, the Nortons, the whatever is like loaded on every device that we have in the house, and make sure that things were kind of meshed together and that we could, understand what was going on. And I just had to get more educated on how do I understand these things? How do I read these reports that come back from these, security companies that you can contract with or whatever? And it was, yeah, and it was just a really, again, eye-opening experience. And I think there's a lot of stuff that people can do that isn't that hard and isn't very costly. And then there's things that you can do that are, you can go as big as you want. Again, we're pretty uninteresting people, so I didn't feel like we had to go create like, Fort Knox protecting the gold around our house, but I definitely felt like we had to do something. And with the kids, oh my word, with all the gaming and the like, friends and whatever that they can make on there, we have like pretty strict enforcement. And we use all those like parental controls to make sure that people can't, sort of come in through that avenue and access our family that way. It's like an ongoing effort.
Yeah, my thing is if you have a cable modem, you have files, and you're using their equipment, they're in there. They know all the 0 days. They know all the access. They know all the exploits. You realize the more you know, the more vulnerable you realize you are.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of education with our youth, because they're just like, yeah, throw any app on your phone and, anything on your VR or headset and whatever. I mean, and these are real risks that they need to understand too. And I think making sure that our young folks have an appreciation for that without sounding like, doomsdayers. And
yeah, well, it's the family that's tough and that you worry about the most, I think, because you worry about your families, you worry about your family. My stuff is for an individual, pretty tight. It's kind of my hobby too, to do all these things, and I've actually loosened up a little bit to allow my life to progress. My family and my kids are another story, and my kids are pretty good. They don't go off and do crazy things that I'm aware of and everything, but still, they watch TikTok. My son, who's older now, but he was into gaming. I mean, I'd see he's on these groups, and I'd have to go in and make sure it's not some crazy thing or whatever that these people he's talking to. I worry much more about them being targeted.
Yeah, I think there's a lot though, also just with our work lives too, to think about, because as we have to be good stewards to our family, and that's always like the number one priority. The other thing that I guess I didn't do differently, but that I was hyper aware of was, I can't send anything over any kind of like personal email that may have any kind of company anything in it, right? That somebody could use, because, it is so much easier to get access to, again, your, sort of common email type accounts versus, most bigger companies have pretty good security, but even those are at risk. But at least if somebody were to get into that, that's not on you, right? That's on the company infrastructure.
It is. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was working for Joe had me doing DLP, or data loss prevention, especially with email. So at one point, we had these attorneys not really engaging in anything bad, but they would forward stuff to their personal emails because they would want to work on it at home and they don't want to log in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's on them then. Like, that's on them. If they're
it's on me. It's on me because yeah.
Yeah, no, I know you took it very seriously, and I told you it was all on you. But in reality, I can tell you a few years later, we often say in security, a lot of the controls are there to keep honest people honest and to keep people from making mistakes, especially when you're talking about DLP, data loss prevention. It's impossible to filter everything. It's there to catch stuff. And, also you got to be careful. It's like, just because your car has anti-lock brakes doesn't mean you go flying around the neighborhood at 60 miles an hour. I mean, you need to have some level of discretion with stuff.
So, Amanda, like, for lack of a better term, again, Joe threw me under a bus. He's like, hey, put these rules in place. Make sure that these attorneys don't forward stuff. So I did that. And then I had an attorney reach out to me saying, Adam, why are you stopping stuff being forwarded to my personal email? I go, because that's part of the requirements of our customers. He said, well, look, the first time I understand, the second time I understand, but the third and fourth, you should have realized that it was normal. So Joe said, go speak to the attorney. So basically, I was on a 30-minute call, and the attorney basically deposed me. He's like, Adam, at what time did you realize, and what date did this started occurring? March 13th, 1986. I mean, I'm being funny, but he goes, how many times did it happen? I go, I don't know these. He goes, why did you come to this call unprepared type of thing? I go, Joe, don't you ever put me in that position again. Joe laughed.
I sent you to him deliberately.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a plan there.
But you know what? When I was a manager, when I was running things, that was one of my privileges, especially at the law firm, that I could send my technical experts to talk to people directly.
I love it.
I said I'll talk to them if they get ticked off on the next level.
Well, and you do have to balance the business needs, right? And there is, the probability factors, right? So what is the probability of something happening, and what is the consequence of if that were to come to fruition? And so I think it's a lot that goes into it, but it is a tricky balance, and oftentimes people wait until they have to respond to a thing, and it becomes a reactionary, process. And so it's just finding that balance of where can you have the fewest amount of reactions and the maximized, proactive actions, so that you can prevent. And it's a formula that nobody has perfect, because if companies went to the model where everything were protected, they wouldn't be able to afford to sustain business. It just wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make business sense, right?
Yeah, well, along those lines, Amanda, I mean, you talked about how when you found out about this, of course, you look at all your personal stuff, you start to tighten it up, you start worrying, you do all those things. What was the reaction that
That's
you
right.
got from work?
So they were fantastic. I will say, both the government side and the company side, they responded, I think, in a really appropriate way. First and foremost, they made sure I was like, okay, because they knew that I was a little bit stressed out about being across the country for my kids, and my husband's on the other side of the world. So I mean, they were great from that personal perspective. But then, as far as the how they responded, every discussion that I was in with my new friends with 3 letters on their names, they were a part of, and they made sure that they understood, what can they do. The good news was that they had done enough at that point where none of my work stuff had been breached. And so that was really, really important. And so there was a lot of validation in that, but I think they also needed that validation because, they're just like any company, like every year you go through hey, what are we spending money on? Did this do us any good? Do we still need to do it? And so I think there was a lot of validation for some of that stuff. And so I'm sure it was part of the incentive for them to continue to do the things that they were doing. And, working in aerospace and defense, like, those companies generally are going to, I think, err more on the side of caution with some of this stuff anyway. And so very risk averse when it comes to a lot of things. So I felt like the company response was super appropriate. They were very involved, and they weren't, I don't know, they weren't laissez-faire about any of it. And so their sort of engagement, I think, gave me a lot of confidence in their sort of future steps there.
Probably,
but I do think that there are some companies that would have taken a different approach, and some companies they've been like, "What did you do? How did you get yourself on this list?"
Well, that's it. You can get, and you're not going to get this in aerospace and defense and regulated industries, but you can get the reaction of, what did you do? Or we checked our stuff, so it's your problem now.
So clearly this is on you. Yeah. Could have been a very different story. This company was fantastic, though, the way they handled it.
There's a lot of discussion of this amongst, cyber people all the time of, what it means and what you get out of working with, the government, the 3-letter agencies. Sometimes they're not there to help you. They're there to help themselves. And so, they're looking for, intel.
They for sure wanted to learn as much as they could. And I think they wanted to understand. And, this list that the Associated Press provided, which was interesting. There was this group, this like sort of, white hat hacker group in the UK had gotten into the Charming Kittens network and extracted this list. And so that's how this whole thing came about, were these like good guy hackers, and they turned it over to the Associated Press. And that's how, anybody got a hold of it. but yeah, I mean, they were interested in other people on that list for sure as well. And I think they were trying to put the puzzle together. And I think for me, it was because again, I was probably the least interesting on the list. I was like never popular. And so it was really funny to be on this like elite list, one that I never wanted to be on. But for people had
Yeah.
like legitimate, I think, interesting things that people had gotten a hold of, it would have had some broader sweeping consequences. I think for me it was like, okay, give us everything you've got. They did their diligence, and I think they just pieced together that mine was more of like your title could theoretically be interesting because nobody really knows what you do. And so we want to know what you do, and is it tied into the things we're interested in. And I think that was the extent for me. I think for other people it was deeper.
Anyone who would wear a Pi Day shirt is definitely interesting, but
Oh, thank you. Geeky, perhaps.
Geeky.
Geeky, but maybe
But
not
you
that
have
interesting to
Yeah.
the charming kittens.
Mhm. But you have to worry about it because, even if you're not the CEO, even if you're not the chief scientist and stuff, when you start getting into the world of, the espionage and the intelligence, it's not like the ransomware guys are looking to steal money. Other guys are looking to steal your identity so they can steal money. But here they're looking for things about you, anyone in the company at any level that they can use, that can be leverage, that, maybe you even have access to something that you really shouldn't. Maybe you don't even know what it is, but that
The
might be
leverage
useful
is
to them,
that's a really interesting point. So luckily, because I do have I mean, I love my life, but to the outside world, very boring, just happy marriage, mom of two wonderful kids, like again, nothing very interesting. But thinking about things that people put on their different mediums of communication, whatever that medium is, if they can get access to something that then suddenly becomes, there's opportunities for blackmail, there's opportunities for, hey, you don't want this to go public, right? And those are really important things to think about too, because people, it is remarkable to me. I listen to Dateline podcasts a lot, right? Like these, these people who commit these murders that likely would have gotten away if they just hadn't put something on social media or in an email or recorded. Like, why do they record things like this? I don't know, but they do. It's just like this human nature thing that has evolved. And so when you think about, the incriminating anything that you don't want, a spouse to know or an employer to know or your mom, whatever.
Yeah. Or even
That could
innocent
be
things.
leverage.
Yeah. You're like, you mean 20 years ago, I met Epstein at a wedding? I don't know. I don't remember.
It's funny. We actually know somebody that.
Do you?
No, we know somebody that
Nothing. I
actually
wouldn't even
worked
thought
for
about
him,
that. Yeah.
unbeknownst to him, and he was like, "I'm getting."
Well, that's right. That's right. We do know someone who worked for his company or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think everybody has a vulnerability somewhere. And I liked that you brought up, like, I don't know, did you meet Epstein at a party 20 years ago? Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And if someone found a picture of you like chumming up with the guy, then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, no, that's not, don't put that out there. That's not me. I don't like this guy.
He just bought a round. What?
No,
That's right. He was buying drinks for everyone. I mean, anything like that could happen. Just there's an individual that my husband and I are friends with, that, is one of those, like, they locked down this individual's work computer. I don't know. He must have gone to a website, not like a nefarious website, but just, I don't know. Maybe he was going to go to DoorDash and order food or something. It wasn't DoorDash. Not to like throw any concerns on DoorDash. But anyway, it it's one of those like, pay us X thousands of dollars or we're going to, wipe out your computer, or I don't know what the thing
Oh,
was.
ransomware. Okay.
Yeah, it was some kind of ransomware thing. And it was his company computer. And so he panicked. And this was a good guy. I mean, I would be surprised if there was any dirt to be dug up on this individual. But he panicked because he was like, oh my gosh, technically maybe I shouldn't have been ordering food or shopping on Amazon or whatever he was doing on his work computer. And so he just kind of panicked and he paid the money. Well, he paid the money. And then of course they didn't take the thing off the computer. Yeah. Right. And we were like, oh, dude, what were you thinking? But he just panicked. And so they wound up, making some money on him. And then he still had to go to his company and say, see, what happened was And so it was, kind of a lose-lose situation. But I think, that's another vulnerability where people just think like, oh, maybe I was doing something wrong. Maybe I'll get in trouble,
Yeah, that's a big problem in security when you're running the program. And one of the things we try to do with like, the security awareness stuff, when you get the thing like, you clicked on the email you shouldn't have clicked on, or you shouldn't do
Yeah.
this and that kind of stuff. People get angry, but then they also, get scared when they see stuff like that. I mean, and something that's really important is to tell people like, look, don't do this stuff, but you got to send a message that please report it. You won't be in trouble, or at least you won't be in as much trouble as if you just let it go or try to hide it or do something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, it's that
tell
bad news
us,
doesn't get better with time.
Exactly.
Like, don't let it sit and swelter. But I think education, I mean, you bring up a really good point, Joe. So I think there's this element of education too. And I think some companies do a really good job of educating people on, hey, if you see something that looks suspicious, send it to us. And there's no punitive anything, just get it to, if you click on it and it does something bad, send it to us. And here's why it's important. And then, some companies, especially, kind of your smaller or maybe small to medium size that really haven't experienced a lot of this stuff, they just don't think about it. It's not in the forefront. So they're not educating their workforce in how to handle these situations and what to do. And maybe they don't even know themselves until they are responding and reacting to a situation. But I think education is really key on this. So I love that you guys have this security cocktail hour, because I think it's, just another opportunity for people to become more educated on the risks that are out there, and how do you handle those risks. And at least if it happens to you, you're not going in completely blind, right? You can have some kind of a plan in mind.
I don't know if Joe's going to agree with me, but I'll tell you this.
Not shocking, because I feel like that's never happened.
I think you're like 0 for 3 at this point with me agreeing with you in this episode, but go ahead.
Most comprehensive cybersecurity programs for firms are not in place because they're trying to do good. I'm not saying they don't want to do good, but most cybersecurity, like these extensive programs, are in place because clients require them in order to do business with them, or in order for them to get cybersecurity insurance.
On the type of business, yeah,
it's usually motivated by risk and revenue. And some companies, when Joe and I used to work together, or I shouldn't say work together, I worked for Joe. He was abusive, but we put in data loss prevention, we put in endpoint detection and response. We put this all in place because it was a checkbox, and we got audited all day. Joe loves audits. So we got audited every week. Every week we had audits going on nonstop. So if we couldn't satisfy those audits, we didn't comply, we didn't get business. And the first person that would call us would be one of the partners that was responsible for that line of business. What do you mean we don't have this in place yet?
Yeah.
Do you agree, Joe? Do you agree?
Well,
I like enforcing factors in some cases, personally.
It's my feelings on it are kind of nuanced, put it that way. It's like, yes, security, awareness, education, it's important. You need to tell people this stuff. People are the first line of defense and all these things, yada, yada, yada. And yeah, a lot of organizations do it because they're required to, who otherwise wouldn't. That's not good. On the other hand, like every other control and every other thing you do, especially in security, you need to be realistic about it. I've always been very disappointed in the field because it's not nearly as effective as we'd like it to be. And I used to, be the hardcore cyber guy who'd say, well, you can't fix stupid. People just aren't going to listen. But, as I've matured a bit, I've learned that, what? People have got a lot going on. They're trying to do their jobs. They're trying to do it under stress. This stuff is complicated. And I will also admit that especially lately, boy, some of the stuff has gotten good and has gotten nasty. And you've got guys who they're, teams of very smart people who, their job is literally to figure out ways to trick people. Amanda, I mean, if you actually, the one cool thing about getting hit by a top level nation state like you did is that if you manage to falter or do something or whatever, you could say, hey, at least I got beaten by the A team. At least it was Roger Clemens who struck me out.
string quarterback. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But it's I like the forcing function though, I will say. I mean, I think that there's because we are busy and I look at myself and I thought I was doing pretty good and I thought I was pretty focused on this kind of thing. And then I realized, I was at work, but I was coming home and wasn't thinking about it the way I should have been. Because I did allow myself to be exposed, right? And again, I was
I
luckily the
don't know if
least
you let
interesting on
yourself
this.
be exposed. You were a good target. I mean, like you didn't open the door and say, "Guys, come on inside. It's
Come
warm in
on
here."
over.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's do
Like I
some
don't
kitten
think
videos. No, but there were other measures I clearly could have taken to help prevent that. And I mean, even
hindsight
just
2020. Yeah.
having things on, like old email accounts that like I don't even use anymore. Like, what was the point? And it's like that's just there for people. Like, just shut it down. Just get rid of it. It's like the hoarders, right? Like, I felt like I was like a digital hoarder of just stuff from 20 years ago that's totally irrelevant, but
You
could,
li-
to the
yeah.
point you guys brought up earlier, could be a vulnerability for whatever
You
reason,
live and
right?
learn. You live and learn. I mean, like you can't live your life worrying about every single thing, but like I always say, you try to put things in place when you can. And this is a very stressful thing. And Joe and I were talking to David on a previous episode, David Wachowski, and he said at one point this I think it was a CEO, he got so stressed about what was going on with a breach that this guy went blind in one eye from the
Yeah.
stress.
Stress does a
Crazy.
lot. Stress does a lot. Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Stressful to even think about.
Okay, so in the aftermath of it, I guess everything was okay. You did not. If
Yeah,
I can hear the kids screaming in the background, so I guess they're okay. Well, I'm glad to hear
kids are
that.
fine.
So,
I mean, they're wild little maniacs, just like they should be. I call them my terrorists now. They're 9 and
okay,
11. They're boys. Oh, I shouldn't say that. They're wonderful, but yeah, everything was fine. But it was interesting because I was a senior director when that happened. And then, my next role, I became a VP and now I was on the executive team. And so it definitely was something where I had to really think about, like, going back to all the discussions we had earlier, like, how am I thinking about things? How am I communicating? How am I educating? All the things that I needed to be hyper aware of with this particular team. And I had a blend of commercial and defense in that particular business that I took on. And so I had to be really sensitive and thoughtful to that. And then, going over to the next company that I went to, which was really interesting because they were hitting this like hyper growth period. And I got there like right on the cusp of this like crazy hyper growth where they were going from being a small company to a medium or I mean, maybe even a large company at this point. They just grew so fast where it's like I had to carry some of those experiences with me and what we were doing because we were working in a world of software and, you know, dealing with customers information and pretty sensitive information. And so how do we make sure that we're thinking about all those are on the forefront, that we have the right relationship with infosec, that we have a regular cadence with them to make sure the things that we're doing, the people that we're hiring, all the things can at least be a recipe for you know lowering our risk factor and making sure as an executive there that I had to be a good steward to that company, to that team, this like new team that we were building up very, very rapidly. And then we didn't get too over our skis and too excited about the growth and forget about the risks that are associated with that.
That's that was that's the irony, Amanda, right? People want, like, it's not necessarily a negative thing that you were targeted by an APT in some ways. It gave you the growth and the experience and the background so that you could actually have the perception in another organization to use your real life experiences to help that next organization or even the current one that you were at the time. So learning experiences do help us grow.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, I do think that, any situation that we're in, so we have all these sayings in my house and, some of them come from my days in the military. Embrace the suck. That's one that, come from my green suitor days. I think the greatest gift you can give a young person these days is the gift of resilience. And so how do you give them resilience? You do hard things, right? So we have this saying like, we do hard things. And we actually also say persist for the reward of resilience. And all of these experiences do build up resilience and allow you to make better, more informed decisions as you go. And so I am grateful for all those obscure experiences, whether it was this or, whatever the case, whatever the hard thing is that we've got there. We've all gone through them, right? We've all had our own fair share of hard things. I think that those we should be grateful for, which always feels good to say after you're through the hard thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it feels good to say, and it's very true. I'm glad that you learned all that and were able to apply it and didn't really have anything catastrophic happen.
Yeah,
that would be
I was
terrible,
very fortunate. Again, it pays to be the boringest one on the list, so that was cool. But definitely has me a little hyper aware these days.
They say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but that might be the train that's going to hit you.
That's right. Might be.
No, but they're
such a New York thing. That stay out of the subway tunnels.
Yeah, I'll try. But the point I'm making is,
have that here.
When you're going through a rough time, I mean, I was kind of being funny, but when you're going through a rough time, after you're through it, like, oh my God, wow, that was horrible, but I learned from it. But so, when you're going through it, you don't think of it that way. But,
yeah, well, you have to try to, though. I mean, like more information than we need on this podcast, but like Adam knows this, but I went through cancer in 2024. So January 5th of 24, I have the big C, and it's like, whoa, I'm sorry. Can we start over? Because I think I misunderstood. And that was a lot to take on, and, to go through that journey and continuing to go through that journey. But I do think it's important that you do have to, this is something that I've been trying to do more in the last few years, is be more reflective kind of in the moment. Because it's always about like next play, what are we doing next? Like pushing forward. But if you don't stop and just reflect a little bit and think about, sort of where you are and how you got there and what you're learning, then I think you're kind of like missing those opportunities. So yeah, it's good to think about it after it's all said and done. But I think if you can be, intentional enough to reflect in the moment, whether it's, oh, the charming kittens think I'm interesting, that's terrifying, or, oh, I have cancer, that's terrifying, or take your poison, right? Whatever the thing is. And I have actually this sticky note on my desk. Oh, the cleaning folks came, and so they moved it. But anyway, so I usually have a sticky note that says, what, so what, and now what? And the what is like, wow. What is happening? And I wrote this down because I'm trying to be more intentional on this, like reflective in the moment. So what is happening? So what is like, so what am I learning from this? What is the point of this thing that I'm going through, whatever it is? And maybe it's just a really rough meeting with your boss and you're like walking away going, oh, I'm an idiot. Okay, so what do I need to learn from that? And then the now what is like, now what? Now what am I going to do? What am I going to do about this? How am I going to take this forward? And I think you could apply that in any aspect of your life.
Hey, Joe.
Anyway, I got a little philosophical.
Maybe not our logo. Maybe we should make a mug. What? So what? Now what? There's 3 lines on a mug.
Go for it.
You know what? That kind of motivational stuff, I think, would probably sell a lot more than cybersecurity. We should go into that business.
Man, I started making mugs and I started selling good. Joe goes, you actually sold our mugs? I'm like, yeah, we sold out. He goes, yeah, we're in the wrong business, maybe.
Yeah, I still haven't seen the money hit the bank account, but yeah, we sold.
I bought a couple steaks with that.
Expenses, I know. All right. Okay, well, you know what? You're very right. Resilience is really important, and learning from those tough times. If you're going to have them, you make the most of them and learn from it. But I am very happy to hear on both counts, especially the health count, that it looks like you're doing okay and that you've come through all of this good. And we really appreciate your sharing your insights with us. I got to be honest, although, I've been in this for a long time, we've dealt with a lot of incidents. I'm trying to think if I've ever actually sat down and, had an in-depth conversation with someone who's been through it, who's been targeted like that.
One of the 77 right here.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing. It's been super interesting.
This has been great. And I appreciate it. I appreciate what you guys do. I think just, getting the message out there and keeping people focused. I mean, it's not like we're going to have less need for cybersecurity in the future. It's only going to be more and more. And then what happens once we start figuring out, quantum entanglement and all the things that are coming in the future? Like, we're just going to need people like you guys to help keep us grounded and focused on, how do we think about these things? How do we address these things? What is happening in the world? And so I appreciate you guys a ton.
We need people like you and our guests to share their experiences. We love bringing that to our people, to our audience, because that's how we learned, and we appreciate that. I'm not just buttering you up. This is a great experience, at least for me. So,
all right. Well, this was fun.
All right, Amanda, thanks again. This has been a lot of fun and really interesting and helpful to everyone. So,
good.
So it's been great.
Hope so. I appreciate your time today, gentlemen. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.